there are things the human brain is really good at. There's things the computer brain is really good at. The idea is to take the computer brain things away from the person and use their human brain in the stuff where we can use it the best.
What's your opinion on using artificial intelligence in process design?
I'm a huge AI fan and an automated robotic steps. But again, what this comes down to is doing the right thing. I had an example of something where we were at I was leading a team that was trying to do some pretty big transformation stuff. And we went to a sister company. And what these people did was they collected data, which is the same thing we were doing, just in a different industry. Collected huge piles of data, scraped it off the web, and it was supposed to be forms that were in a certain way. So it was an automated process that would scrape it. And we had the same thing. We'd automatically scrape this data, and then we had to figure out what was when there was something that was wrong, and then find out what was wrong and fix it, right? The state is the wrong letters, or it's 2 inches to the left, or whatever, right? There was something about every one of these that would happen. So the IT staff that I was working with our company had built incredibly complex business rules, and they just got more and more complex each year. Just got worse and worse, and it was this huge, heavy thing to try to do this automated process.
So it looked like the U.S. tax code.
Yeah, this was actually what this was us collecting data from government sources.
There you go.
It was for the power industry, and every power plant had to put these forms in, and 99% of the forms were right, but 1% were wrong. And you need to, and it was just like the form was wrong or it scanned wrong. It was always something small and goofy.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea was to take this data and not just replicate it, but clean it. That was our value add. So we went to a sister company who did that with different information, and they showed us their process, and they had an automated scrape, and they had a thing that tried to fit it into the template, and every one that didn't fit into a template, they threw it into a bucket, and a person looked at it and went, oh, that's just got an extra space in it. Oh, that's 2 things to the left. Yeah, there's your number, right? And I looked at my IT guy, and he goes, we'd have spent like 6 months trying to figure out how to automate that. It was about automate the right stuff and then throw it to a human to do an exception. And there's a juice for squeeze with automation. Where you start going, I am now putting in so many complex business rules, and yet I still keep getting bit. I find a new one. I find a new one. I find a new one. It's like, yeah, you can keep building that, but to some extent, you've got to make sure I'm doing the right work with the right kind of brain, electronic or organic.
80-20 rule, right? I mean, you gotta, get the most out of just that 20%, 80% of your results.
Right.
I mean, you're gonna have to do that. Yeah, Pareto.
But that's why we always say, and then collect data on the 20. Because then 6 months later, you go, look, I've got this big pile of data. Here's something that's really consistent. Our human people have always been able to spot every time it's like this, it's like that. There's your new business rule. Stick that in there, and now you cut a little bit more out of the pile. That's continuous improvement. So
So would you say that your continuous improvement, you don't necessarily want to do something like automate that for something that is the exception to the rule, something that happens 1% of the time, but it doesn't really affect anything. Because I see a lot of companies when they're putting together their ERP system, and I've sat in a lot of these meetings, and they're like, well, sometimes this happens. Well, fine. Yes. What percentage of the time does that happen? Do we really need to address that in here, or can you just have a human do it instead of a system? Is that where that kind of falls in place?
Exactly. That's what we call the difference between solving versus exception handling. Mm-hmm. When you've got the 1%, am I really going to design my entire new process solution around the 1%? Or am I going to build a smart process that clearly identifies the 1, pitches it out of the process to a new process? Right. That's the key. It's one of those where you go through and say, well, I want to figure out how to identify and then automate it. You go, if you've identified it, why didn't the first thing we do is pull it out of the main process?
Right.
Let the machine keep flowing. Don't stop it. Get that out. Now we're going to build a second process. The second process is taking a look at those exceptions and figuring out how to do them. And that's why I said that's where you're going through figuring out how to do them. And if later I start finding another automatable thing in that human interaction, maybe I can peel those out, put it back in the main flow so it doesn't stop the flow anymore. That's even more continuous improvement. That's the kind of stuff that Six Sigma focuses on.